Greetings, everyone. It is an honor to be able to connect with you again for another Teacher Talk. We're in episode 42, which I can't believe it. 42 weeks ago, we were first struck with the COVID-19 pandemic, and so many institutions of learning were closed down and moved to completely online or hybrid options. And I wanted to use this originally as a way to stay connected to my students, but I feel so blessed that it has evolved and sort of blossomed into an amazing opportunity to connect with friends and colleagues all over the world that are passionate and working within the arts and education. So if it's your first time watching, I want to welcome you to this platform. Even though you see two people on the screen, I want you to know that you are absolutely a part of this conversation. As we are talking, if you have any questions or comments, if you would just pop them into the chat features. We're live streaming on Facebook and on YouTube, and we'll see those questions and bring them into the dialogue as soon as we can. I am really excited to have a new colleague and friend of mine here in the Pacific Northwest, Miss Beth Fortune, who is the orchestra director at Ballard High School in Seattle Public Schools. And it's great to have her. She is genuinely, and I know that this is going to sound probably a bit exaggerated, but anyone that knows Beth can attest to this. She really is a legend in her own right when it comes to alternative styles and bluegrass music and teaching in public schools and alternative pedagogies. She has done incredible work with local and state and national and international organizations to promote all of these different ideas. And so I'm so excited to have her. I said that today's conversation was going to focus on collaboration, which I think that it will. I have been really fortunate to collaborate with Beth on a couple different projects already. In the very short amount of time that we have known each other, we've worked together a lot, which I think is awesome.
Yes.
And so we are going to talk about those collaborations and talk about sort of opportunities that you can look for in your own community and sort of the benefit of being able to collaborate. But that being said, right before we came on, we had slipped into what I consider sort of a natural conversation at this point amongst educators and artists alike, and that is trying to figure out what happens tomorrow. The world seems so uncertain in many terms, and after the completely ridiculous and heinous and egregious attack on the state capitol this past week on Wednesday, I think some of that uncertainty has only been exaggerated, and it's difficult. I shared with Beth, and many of my colleagues know, I am in an incredible place of privilege as an educator in higher ed, where I had the ability and power to cancel my classes, and I ended up canceling my classes on Wednesday because I couldn't teach. I didn't know how to act, and even the next day on Thursday morning, I'm talking to my students, and everything just seemed so insincere and disingenuous of, what are we doing? Like, why? I was teaching a brass methods class, and like, why am I trying to get you to learn the trumpet right now when I don't even know where the country is? I mean, it's just distracting is not a strong enough word to explain what it feels like to be trying to teach and trying to make music, let alone trying to make music right now. I think as artists, we always want to be heard, but I think we want to be heard and we want to affect change, even if it's small change with the people that are listening. And for me, I'm sort of screaming into these voids that social media provide me and talking to colleagues, and I don't know that I'm making any change happen. And I want to be, I think all educators have that desire to see change in the people they surround themselves with. It's one of the reasons we're educators. So it's been, frustrating is one adjective. There are so many ways to describe it. And add on top of that issue still with the pandemic and trying to get the vaccine out and how schools are rolling out. Primary schools are starting to get back to face-to-face instruction cautiously, but for our secondary schools, it's probably not going to happen for the rest of the year. Or if it is happening, I know back in Texas where I'm from, I have twin baby brothers that are seniors this year. They had gone back to hybrid instruction and then had to shut down because there was a huge surge in cases. So now they're back to fully online. And God bless their teachers that are literally having to respond to this week by week. Students are coming and then going, and then people are getting sick, and then the parameters change, and then the internet goes down, and it's just the variables that seem to just, constantly be shifting, make it nearly impossible to do what it is we want to do. And I think that's the most difficult thing, is to try to differentiate between what we want and what we need right now. We need to stay connected. We need to keep trying something rather than nothing. And I know Beth stands as a testament to that. Um, but it's difficult. It's difficult to say the very least. So I think we might, after our introductions, kind of continue that conversation, and undoubtedly it'll lead to collaboration. But if it doesn't, that's one of the beauties of these talks is we're here to just connect, utilize technology to connect and have the conversations that need to be had. And I think silence is not an option. We need to talk about our frustrations and our disappointments. I don't think it is pessimistic. I think it's realistic. And once we start talking about the challenges, that's how we formulate solutions. So that was my sort of long-winded introduction. I like to give a few minutes for people to be able to check in. This program that we offer, Teacher Talks, is sponsored by a student organization at SPU called the Falcon Feathers. Stands for Future Educators in the Arts Transforming Human Experience and Realities. It's a wonderful group of students that are dedicating their future career aspirations to the arts and education. I am so grateful for the students that I get to work with. I hope some of them are watching. And again, for everyone that's watching, please feel free to engage with us. You can post your comments and questions. We'll absolutely love to be able to bring those in. I see my good friend from Texas, Dr. Brandon Beck. So good to see you, Brandon. Again, thank you all that are watching. Today I have Beth Fortune with us, and so happy to have her. I'm going to have her introduce herself in just a second, but before we get started, I think this is always appropriate, especially in light of what was going on. Seattle Pacific University is a private liberal arts school with a Christian identity, so I'd like to just do a brief moment of prayer and reflection. Whatever that means to you, people participate in prayer in a lot of different ways, and meditation a lot of different ways. So however you participate in it, this is just a moment to reflect and sort of ground ourselves before we start our conversation. Please join me. Lord, thank you for the resources you provide us with the gifts and talents that you bless us with. I pray that we're able to use them to further your glory and to grow closer to you and to seek your guidance. God, thank you for the technology. I pray a special blessing upon it, that it stays strong and keeps our connection strong so that we can minister to others through this conversation, that we can affirm the emotions and the reactions that they're experiencing, and that we can encourage them to keep teaching, to keep making music, and encourage ourselves to see the importance of the work that we're doing in the human beings we connect with through the arts. God, thank you for Beth and the amazing work that she's doing. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to collaborate with her and make music and teach others through music. God, we are so grateful for all of these things, and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So, Beth, tell us a little bit about yourself. I am fortunate to know you, but we might have some viewers that are not familiar with your sincerely incredible career. And so just give us a little background. Where are you coming from and where are you right now?
So I always introduce myself as a lucky kid from Montana. So I grew up in Montana, Billings, Montana, which one would not really guess it, not knowing much about Montana, but Montana, at least in the larger towns of Montana, has allocated for arts in the public education setting well. So I was granted the opportunity to try violin at fourth grade, and as taught by an actual string teacher. And then I had the opportunity to continue my music study throughout my public education and into college. And I was certainly a very, very lucky child in that my parents were supportive of that endeavor and provided me with a lot of things that ensured my success, such as private lessons, piano lessons, all of these things. And I just, I don't know, for some reason knew that I was going to go ahead and be an orchestra teacher from the moment I walked across the stage at my high school graduation at Billings Metra Arena. And just kind of pursued that from the get-go. My very first year of college, and this has served as an extremely eye-opening and valuable learning experience for me. My very first year of college, I decided to go from Billings, Montana to Mobile, Alabama, and study at the University of South Alabama for a year. And that was just like, whoa. As far as like the two places go, it couldn't be more different. On a map, it couldn't be more different. Just so many eye-opening things, and this was happening, back in 1995 and 96. So just I valued that period of time that I was able to see the world in so many different ways than what had been in Montana. But I came back after that year and finished my college study at the University of Montana. In that time, I got involved in a rock band and played an electric violin hooked into an effects processor into an amp turned up to 11, as I like to say. And we as a group toured around the region, all the way, like pretty much like the western half of the country. We made our own money. We allotted each other $25 a week when we were on tour. We ate the food that was gifted to us in the venues where we played, and we purchased a school bus, a decommissioned school bus, and we traveled around in this school bus that we painted purple with rainbow stripes. And so that was also a very, it was going through that whole entire experience was so great. As a musician, I experienced what happens when you have a gig every night and the amount of improvement that happens as a musician when you are absolutely playing and performing almost every night. And I also just knew when I was touring with a Bendigo, I just knew this is a moment that I need to be cognizant of because this is special. This is special, a very special moment. Of course, the band broke up. We had a big, huge blowout on stage at a fancy venue on Halloween, and we were painted blue. And that was our last gig. And at that moment, I had just graduated from college. It was October. I had my brand spanking new teaching certificate that I was like, I'm going to perform. I'm not going to teach. I'm going to perform. October rolls around. We have the blowout. And I find myself in this position of, okay, I don't think the band is going to pan out. So I'm going to need to find a teaching gig. And so I started subbing in Missoula County Public Schools. And I was just trying to figure out what to do with my life. By January, I was like, I need a real teaching job here, folks. And so in Montana, and Christopher, I'm not quite sure what type of certification your graduates walk away with, but I walked away with a K-12 choral, instrumental, and general music certificate, which I've been able to nurture all these years, which is great. And interestingly, I've taught all of it, all grades. So I was like, okay, I need to find a job. So I started looking, in this radius of Missoula, Montana, who's hiring mid-year. So as it turns out, I found a elementary general music teaching job deep within the Kitsap Peninsula in the South Kitsap School District, and took over in January, the January before 9/11, and took over for a teacher who had suddenly passed away. And so thus begins my 20-year career in Washington State, teaching general music. And so I packed up my car, drove out to Washington State, and started teaching general music. And I am a violinist, and I had this, student teaching experience in the elementary setting. But I found out pretty rapidly that I would definitely rather be teaching instrumental music, preferably strings. So I taught at this elementary school for a year and a half. And so I finished out that first year that I started in January. During that year, we had the largest earthquake that Washington has had since, I guess. So coming from Montana, that doesn't happen there. So in the middle of it, because I taught in a little portable, in the middle of it, I was teaching a fourth grade class. Everything started happening. I don't really remember much except that a fourth grade child took over all of the different safety procedures, got me to safety and the rest of everybody else to safety. And I woke up with my arm around two kids like this. It was crazy. So that happened in that first year, and then the next year, 9/11, and man, that was a crazy moment in our history, right? But right now, we're faced with this other crazy moment in our history that deserves some comparison and contrast. We'll get to that later. So after the year of 9/11, I found what I consider to be probably one of the coolest string teaching gigs that has ever existed at Seattle's Washington Middle School in the Central District. And I was able to be in that position for like 16 years. So it was so special to me to be a part of the Washington Middle School community, which is a very, very vibrant community that has a very long history of valuing music and jazz and valuing culture, and just, I guess, being in the community of Seattle, which is a place where I have been able to find a platform for envelope pushing in at least my areas. And my areas are, how do we think of music education, and how can we push the envelope to make, I guess, to change music education. And one of the most eye-opening things really about my tenure here in Seattle Public Schools is really the green light that I've had to do some things that are pretty far out of the norm, and to do it with support of administration, to do it with support of colleagues, to do it with support of our city and our community and our arts community. So I attribute quite a lot of the success that I've had to this overarching community that we have that embraces going for it as far as making needed change, I guess. I taught for 16 years at Washington Middle School, and then took the opportunity to fill out the whole entire concept. At Washington Middle School, I taught choir and orchestra. I taught choir for 10 years there, and orchestra. So I've done the elementary general music thing. I've done choir and orchestra in the middle school level, and now I'm working in a high school where I am running a high school orchestra program plus guitar classes. So that K-12 general, choral, and instrumental cert has certainly not been wasted at all.
This is amazing, and it's so valuable to hear the perspectives and experiences that you've had. I particularly want to highlight that you had this non-traditional path to certification,
Yeah,
which is something that I feel like I have to constantly reinforce within our career in general, is that the idea that you should be graduating at 21 or 22 with your certification to go teach, like, it's just not true. There's so much value in going out and gigging or working or performing and then getting into the classroom. And I think that I personally believe that should be true for all disciplines. I always shudder when I would see student teachers that were like 22 teaching high school. You need to be more than 4 years older than the people you're teaching. Like, it just, that's a scary prospect. And it's not that it can't be done and that people aren't successful doing it, but I was so grateful that I spent time sort of living life and getting professional experiences. And by the time that I put my foot into a public school classroom, I was coming with what I considered really practical knowledge, as opposed to, and I know this is a controversial statement, but anybody that knows me knows that you can't talk about the prospect of changing music education without me saying it. Um, the system is designed to produce very particular music teachers, teachers that inherit and then through their actions support systems of music education.
yep,
And I like to speak against that. I don't think that there's one way of learning, and therefore there can't be one way of teaching. So when institutions sort of establish themselves, particularly colleges and universities, to produce a certain type of graduate, quote unquote, they garner a reputation of, yeah, that teacher does well at festivals, or
right,
students that went to that university know how to do this thing. That really frustrates me, because ultimately you're just limiting the perspective of your teachers, which then limits the perspective of their students. So I'm always eager to find people that are non-traditional. In other words, did not matriculate through a bachelor's degree, finish with their certification, and immediately go out into the classroom. It can be done, and I know a lot of successful people that have done that. But I think that there's a unique value in people that pursue studying music and the arts and then go and actually do those things. They go and they perform, and they're gigging, and they're doing recitals, and they're doing exhibitions, and they go out and do the thing and then come into the classroom with that experience. Some of the greatest mentors I've had have not necessarily been music teachers, but they have been people that have done that. I had a good friend, Anne, that taught biology at the high school that I was teaching at, and she was a biologist. She ran a laboratory, she worked with a large company, and then she did that for a few years and said she wanted to take a break because it was always grant funded and there wasn't sort of long term career trajectory. She thought, I want a little more stability, and she came in to teach. Her perspective of teaching science was so extraordinary because she taught it like a scientist,
right.
not someone that studied it in books and then was going to teach it. And I don't want to denigrate the respect that all educators deserve, but it was amazing to watch her teach science because she had worked as a scientist. And I feel the same. I think, if I could be so bold, I think you can tell that distinction from different educators. You can tell the English teacher that publishes poetry from the English teacher that just teaches English. You can tell the conductor that gigs with a community orchestra or has a community chorus they lead or works with a church group, but also comes and works with the public schools. So I don't say it again to disrespect people that don't have that path, but I do want to say it to promote the people that don't just go straight through school into a classroom, because I think that that has a lot of important value. So I'm grateful for you sharing that story and then bringing that into your classroom, because it's so important.
That, and another way that you can look at this, and another thing that I think has really shaped me in who I am. I'm a pretty rebellious person. So, my advice to to teachers who are, or people who are studying to be teachers and see themselves as music teachers. You are going through a college program, or maybe you're a teacher now and you're, I don't know, feeling stuck or something like that. I don't know. I'm a rebellious person. So you're working with professors, you're working with people who they are hired to kind of give you a way to do what it is that you are wanting to do. But you should also never think that there's only one way to approach something.
Yes.
I had varying degrees of support for the things that I had interest in when I was in college studying to become a music teacher. I had varying degrees of encouragement from my professors. I had varying degrees of, I don't know, success in trying to talk about some of my ideas with professors. And as much as I learned from professors, I also, had I just gone with what they told me to do, I would absolutely not have had hardly any of the cool experiences that I've had.
Amen.
Like going into my career and taking calculated risks and trusting in myself. Like, I can pull this off. I believe in myself, even though, like, say my conducting professor told me that I absolutely should not be pursuing music education, told me that I had a problem with my conducting. Even though there was no place for me in any of the improv music classes that happened at my university, even though there wasn't an opportunity to honor the non-classical music that I played professionally. All of this kind of stuff played into me having kind of, I have a mission, and my mission is to empower my students to make the music that they want to make. I'm not here to tell them this is the only right way to make music. I teach in an orchestra setting, so I am sometimes needing to adhere to a Eurocentric setup where everyone sets up in, a U-shaped formation and someone stands up front waving a baton. But I want students to understand that this is only one way of making music on your stringed instrument. And if I could wave that wand, that baton, and turn it into a magic wand, for when we return to, I guess, normal, whatever we want to call normal.
Yeah.
If I had the opportunity to wave the wand, I would eliminate these preconceived notions about what is orchestra and what is it that orchestras do.
Mm-hmm.
Because in my opinion, orchestras do a whole heck of a lot more than just, or orchestras should do a whole heck of a lot more than just get the Elgar up to a place where you're going to take it to an adjudicated festival and that adjudicator is going to give you a gold star.
It's so narrow.
Yeah.
I think that's what people fail to realize when they.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute you real quick because it'll prevent the feedback. I think it's what people fail to realize is that there's this sort of fear of retribution if you go outside of this Eurocentric model of orchestra, and then the opposite of that, people assume that if they if they only teach Eurocentric music in the orchestral setting, that they'll be condemned from people that want them to do more. And if they don't, if they branch out into alternative styles in other areas, that they'll be condemned for not doing what they were supposed to do. And it's about just offering opportunities to express yourself musically on string instruments. Like, that's a long-winded way of saying it, but that should be the goal, because when you don't do that, you are limiting the perspective of what music is. And that, I mean, that should be a crime in education, because it's so wrong to only see it one way.
So, I mean, for like, it's actually interesting, you did some of your professional teaching in the public school system in Texas. And I look at Texas, and okay, I don't know much about it, but it seems real strict and real crazy. Like, you have to, in order to remain employed, you have to have your orchestra score a certain level at an adjudicated event. And to me, that just seems really, really scary. And again, I might be totally speaking out of turn, but why do we do that still?
Yeah.
And, I feel like it has no real place in reality, actually. A person who, especially in this day and age, wants to become a professional player, there's lower and lower chance that you're going to get some kind of professional symphony gig. So if you're gonna want to become a professional player, you have to have a variety of skills in styles you play, a variety of skills in approaches you take, a variety of skills in collaboration with other folks, a variety of skills in what I call music industry literacy. And if we're taking a whole school year to perfect, just the classics as written by a handful of white men, and the whole goal of the year is to have won on some type of adjudicated festival, where the adjudicator is yet another white man sitting there writing out comments, and your whole success is in his hands, and he has spent zero time with your kids, zero time with you in the preparation of this music. He's just there for this 20-minute chunk. He's going to give you a 1 through 4, and that's going to determine your success of your career. I don't know. To me, it just seems like there's so much more we could do. There's so much more we could do, which is why I sometimes want to like turn away from that and just be like, I'm going to do my own thing. And to a certain extent, I believe that that's what I've been able to do here in Seattle.
Yeah. You and I have talked about this before. That is one of the biggest questions I pose to my students and my colleagues. How do you define success? Mm-hmm. And it's irresponsible for me to speak on behalf of all educators in Texas. But for any of my colleagues, music educators that are in Texas right now, I can tell you from my experience that your perception, Beth, is true. I have been...
It's scary that it is, because I was hoping you would say it's not actually like that.
No. Again, it's irresponsible for me to speak for everybody, but from my experiences teaching in the state of Texas, and for that matter, my experiences growing up in the state of Texas, because I went to K through 16, I went to Texas schools. Texas is it's so odd, Texas and California for that matter. They're such large states geographically and politically and economically that you really can sort of live your life and have your career in those states, and it's not a bad thing. which, no, I hesitate to even give a different example because I think that people might take offense to it, and that's not my goal. But like, let's say I'm going to go to school, go to college, and have my career in Alaska.
Hmm.
Like, that's amazing, but that's a really limited scope of what you can accomplish is to just be in that one state, because Alaska, in terms of like inhabitable land, right? Like, it's a huge state, but there's so few, the cities are so tiny and the opportunities are limited because of natural and economic resources and such, as opposed to someone saying like, I'm going to live my life and go to school and have my career in New York. Like, okay, right? Like, in the state of Texas. And I think that should be understood, that there are certain states and cities that can provide more opportunities than others. So I mention that because I was born and raised in Texas, and I was trained through my experience in music education as a student in public schools that, like, this is it. We're the best. We are the model. This is how it works. Don't question the system. And when I went to college, it was the same thing in college. This is the system. Even if you don't like it, it proves to be successful. I had been told, and this is kind of terrifying to admit, from colleagues, from professors, from mentors, everybody wants to be like Texas. I was told that. Everybody looks to us for the standard. This is what they want. This is what they aspire to. And I'm just soaking it up as a college student, like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
I need to uphold this mantle. I'm inheriting this tradition, and I have to protect it because this is what everybody wants and what they hope for. And the very long story, very, very short, I got to the end of my senior year as an undergrad, and I was like, no, absolutely
Yeah.
not. I don't want to teach public school. I don't agree with it. I'm against it. I don't like the models. I dare say, like you, I consider myself a rebel, and I was just pushing against it. I decided not to do it. I moved away from it. Decided to go in grad school and stayed in grad school for a while. And I actually had, at one point, I was majoring in music ed in grad school, and I had a teacher there, highly respected, incredible sort of music educator in their own right, but approached me after a class because I was pushing against an assignment, and I was like, I don't want to do it this way. I don't see it this way, and could we look at it a different way? And they were challenging me, and I'm trying to be sort of humble and admit that, like, in context, I could try to see it from their perspective, but hopefully this will shock you. They did not agree with how I saw education and pedagogy, and thought that I was being sort of foolish, and then said, well, what do you want to do later in life? And I was like, I want to perform, and I want to compose, and I want to teach, and I want to do all this stuff. And they were like, have you ever thought about being a truck driver? This is a legitimate conversation I had in grad school, not as an undergrad, in grad school, as a music education major. And I went, excuse me? And they were like, I think you would do really well as a truck driver of like 18 wheelers. And I was like, what? And they're like, well, you're just not going to make it as a public school teacher. You don't have the stamina. You couldn't actually do what needs to be done. But if you could have a job that would allow you to travel and make money, and then you could write music and kind of create your own schedule, I think you'd be successful. You should look into being a truck driver. And obviously, I left that conversation completely insulted and completely demeaned. And I mean, here was this very highly respected music educator who was quote unquote known for producing results
Yeah.
in so many ways. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. And there were a lot of people that were, ironically, were not willing to sort of defend me, but actually did the opposite. They were defending the faculty member, like, well, they said you need to be a truck driver, so maybe you should look into that. And I was,
You find yourself out of the club.
right? And forgive me on a Sunday afternoon, but I was very quick to call bullshit. I was like,
Yeah.
no, like that interaction is not going to determine what I do with my future. I completely disagree with them, and I don't have to agree with them, and that's their perspective. And I was so blessed to find people that I admired that were out in the industry doing the things I aspired to do. And needless to say, I graduated and started a program and taught in public schools for 8 years, and so I say all this to say I was successful, but I was responsible for defining my success, because within that 8-year career, I was written up by my principal for being it was a disqualification that I received at a festival, and I got written up for it
Oh my
for
God.
not representing the school appropriately,
Oh my God.
and not upholding professional standards. I was I was written up several times before I decided to leave, which was a very, very difficult decision to make. I think I had been written up. I just counted. It was like 8 times in
Oh
3 years.
my God.
Um, and one of them was for my performance at a UIL contest. Another one, the one that was the clincher, which I don't mind bringing up because I think this could lead to a powerful conversation. And I see that my good friend Brandon Beck is watching, and he was a huge support for me in this challenge. One of the last times that I got written up, I had canceled a trip with my students because uh, the administrators, this was not just one person, this was just sort of a collective, had decided that students that I had in my orchestra program that identified as trans were going to have to sleep in separate quarters. And they told me this, and I was like, separate but equal doesn't work. Like this, there's already a precedent. This is blatant discrimination and segregation, and like I'm not going to do that to my
Yeah.
students. You know, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
And so I made the decision to cancel the trip. I was like, you know, if we can't have our quarters set up a certain way, then it's not worth going on the trip because it's going to do more damage than good. And this was like a summer sort of leadership retreat that I would do with my kids. And I said, okay, we're just going to cancel it. And then not even like a week later, I got written up for non-ethical practices, for
Oh my
breaking the
God.
teacher code of ethics, um, for making a decision based off of my students' gender identities or so. I mean, just something absolutely heinous and unfounded. It was such a I mean, it was such a political move to just add to my file. And a good friend of mine that worked in administration, they were like, Chris, they're just trying to get your file, you know, thicker so that they could justify, you know, non-renewing you. And I was just like, and I only reason I bring this up, I am in no way a martyr because I am not the only person that experiences this, but I bring it up to affirm your assumptions. Is this is what I went through in Texas, that I did not fit in the mold. I did not
Yeah.
fit the expectation. And so the reaction, and I really do believe it was a reaction, not a response, because I did have good relationships with administrators, and I did have positive experiences teaching public school. But one of the lasting things that I have to deal with is that I did not fit what they wanted me to be. So they worked actively to get rid of me. They wanted to make things more difficult for me and my students because I didn't uphold these traditions of what good teaching and a good music program looked like. And I mean, I can say I was bitter. I genuinely am not bitter anymore, but I'm absolutely scarred by it. I mean, it was a
Oh
horrible
yeah.
experience.
I mean, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And 100% opposite of the way Seattle public schools would operate. In fact, I remember the first time I was going to be taking a trip with students who needed for their gender identity alternative, like I had to think of, you know, rooming and all of these things um, in a way that was going to serve them.
Yeah.
And honestly, I was scared about it. But Seattle Public Schools actually has people on staff at the district that will help you through these situations. So I called that person and she walked me through every single step of how I should set this up, ways to communicate with travel planners, ways to communicate with parents, ways to communicate with students. And it ended up being a great trip.
Yeah.
So, wow, that is just mind blowing. But I guess that kind of dovetails really well into the concept. This is a concept that I kind of came up with as we moved into our new reality with COVID. And I call it courageous collaboration. Because in the world of traditional music education in the United States, public school music education. It's usually, band, orchestra, choir, maybe jazz band. And all of these things happen kind of by themselves. And teachers can say, oh yeah, we totally collaborate. Yeah, the band sends players over to do some full orchestra music with the orchestra teacher, or yeah, we do a combined concert every year. Or, oh yeah, we have staff meetings every Wednesday or whatever. And yeah, I guess that's collaboration. But when I'm talking about courageous collaboration, I'm talking about coming together as a group of teachers within a building, or a group of teachers within a community, or a school, or a district, or whatever, and kind of making up a plan that we're going to do this together. We're going to do this together. So honestly, that's like the only way I can see feeling comfortable going forward. And so I feel really lucky that I had the opportunity to do that with you and the kids at SPU for this very first semester with one of my classes. We literally teamed up. We literally aligned our repertoire and our goals, first of all, and then our repertoire.
Yeah.
And literally together went about kind of moving through this semester. And it was really one of the things that totally saved me. And one of the things about courageous collaboration that is hard for some music teachers, because I think we're made to feel that we need to be the end all be all. We need to be the ultimate answer to everything. We need to be the expert that then bestows this knowledge and skill upon our students. But I am the first one to admit, I don't have all the answers. I don't know all the skills, and I need some friggin' help. So, you know what I mean? So, my courageous collaborations include working with people that might have a skill set that's more honed than me in something or other, so that my students can have an experience with this. Or working with someone who is willing to have some real personal conversations about approach, about techniques in teaching, about what actually needs to happen in order to serve students. Sometimes we go along in our life and we know something feels off, but we just keep on going. Being able to unpack the weird nagging feelings with someone is courageous collaboration. And just saying, I'm just feeling really not great about the fact that there's an expectation that I have to bring my students to this festival, and this adjudicator is going to listen to them, and that's going to be the determination on whether or not I'm a successful teacher. Or I'm looking at my program and it is 95% white. I need to do something. I need to figure out some skills, try some new things, and create some opportunities that will help reshape my program so that I'm serving the population of my school, or any other type of thing, rather than just, oh yeah, we have a weekly meeting, or yeah, we do our spring concert together, or yeah, we do pull out full orchestra. Surface collaboration versus courageous collaboration. And teachers that enter into things together, having each other's back. Maybe choosing an initiative of your courageous collaborator that might not be something that directly benefits you, but going to bat for that person. Um, Having tough conversations with admin or the community or students together, to where we don't feel completely alone in all of this heavy duty work, because it's super heavy duty and we need to be engaging in it. So how do you make it a little easier? You do it together.
Man, I hope you, and I am openly volunteering and committing myself to help you write this article or bring this to fruition, because I love this idea of courageous collaboration. I love it
Yeah.
on so many levels. It works on so many levels. And a huge thank you to Brandon Beck. I put a link in for some of the work of Margaret Wheatley, who I was not familiar with, and I see these beautiful parallels to some of the stuff that she does. Um, so thank you to Brandon, because this is perfect. So if you're not familiar, which I'm not, but I'm clicking on some of the links. There's a link there to her website, and there's a very strong parallel to this idea, courageous collaboration, and so necessary. I think, and you said something that I want to go back to. It's somewhat surreal to me that I can't pinpoint when it happens, but that as music educators, as art educators in general, we really do get this idea. Actually, you know what? I'm going to create a caveat. I do know where it comes from. The arts are so often siloed and segregated that we
Mm-hmm.
are almost always on our own.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the elementary school. There's one music teacher, if the elementary school is
Right.
lucky enough to have a full-time teacher. There's
Right.
one visual art teacher, if they're lucky enough to have a full-time art teacher. Usually it's one art teacher between 3 or 4 campuses dealing with like 1,200 students.
Right.
So
Right.
professionally, I can understand. I take that back. I can understand why we feel like we have to do it all on our own, because so often we are put into professional situations where we do have to do it on our own. With that being said, I think that should arguably bring us together. We should find solidarity in the fact that it is arguably inappropriate to go to the principal and expect them to understand the nuances of your discipline, the needs of your program. As a who I consider a great administrator, Kelly Lopez is one of my principals. Told me, Chris, I hired you to be the orchestra director. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not an orchestra director. It's your job to understand the orchestra and its needs, and then to communicate that with me. And I'm so grateful for her telling me that, because I thought, wow, she's right. I can't storm into her office with this list of demands that make no sense to her without any context, without justifying its needs based off of where my students are and the overall campus population. So I had to learn. This is one of the things I tell people often. I learned how to be a teacher, but I then had to learn how to be a public school teacher once I was in public schools. I
Oh,
don't
me
feel like I
too.
was taught how to be a public school teacher. I was taught a lot of pedagogy, but no one was really teaching me how to serve as a community servant, as a public school teacher.
Right.
And collaboration, it just makes sense.
It
I
does.
think of how much pain, literal, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, professional pain I went through, because I was just determined to do things on my own, as if it made it better.
It
Like,
doesn't make it better. That's the thing.
yeah, it just does. And it's so weird, because I was literally just talking to someone yesterday that I was trying to convince, like, hey, let's work together. And I was using you as the example. I said, yeah, I'm doing stuff with, Beth Fortune at Ballard High School. And they were like, oh, but I just don't know if I could. And I was like, here's the thing. You're not signing a contract.
Yeah.
I'm not asking, and this is not like, this isn't a gimmick. I'm not charging you money.
Mm-hmm.
I am in the position of being a director of music education. One of my jobs is to support teachers as I train future generations of teachers. So I don't need you to like humble yourself before me or assume some sort of pretense or something. Like, this isn't some research agenda. This is a part of my responsibility, is to uphold the industry that I'm preparing people to go into. And I want to lead by example. I want to show them what collaboration looks like and how you can maximize resources. And why would I not be doing this? And I am calling out my colleagues at universities and colleges. We should be doing more in
Mhm.
public schools. We don't get to close the gates to our institutions and wait for
Right.
people to be accepted to study with us.
Well, it's just like, yeah, sometimes like an offer of, I could do a master class or
Yeah,
whatever. It's just, it falls kind of flat.
yeah,
Especially when, I just every day I get more and more anxious about that format just not really fitting with reality anymore. Um,
absolutely.
Students have a whole lot going on, and s there are so many people in this world who have forged a path on their own without very much help from, say, any educational institution into professional musicianship. And actually, like the majority of these people did not, in fact, have a timeline of what concerti they needed to be
Yeah,
working on at what time. And they did not, in fact, prepare this extremely stringent type of audition to get into an a conservatory or a music study higher ed place that just gatekeeps so many people and so many voices out. It just has to change. High schools can have really cool and diverse programming and have super cool experiences, but there's always like this feeling in the back of my head like, am I letting my students down if they did want to go and study music in college? Because there is going to be this requirement of you must have a concerto, you must have all of these things for an audition. Um, so much has to change.
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm having my own epiphany, and I'm a very visual learner. I think the rhetoric for so long has been, you go to college so that you open up all of
Mm-hmm.
these doors and these possibilities. And I think what is absolutely fascinating to me in the context of this conversation is that in the arts, I think the opposite tends to happen.
It does,
Is
yeah.
that, you're in your high school, you're passionate about music or the arts, and you're super plugged in, and you want to go further. And when you make the decision to study music after high school, the institution that you go to will end up doing this to your possibilities.
Yeah, it
And it's
puts you,
counterintuitive. People
yeah,
assume, oh, well, I have to get into, the Ivy League. I have to get into the conservatory. And it's like, no, it's actually the opposite. When you go to those institutions, the possibilities of what you can do in the arts and arts education tend to, broadly speaking, narrow, because they have these tiny fissures into what they define as success. Whereas
mm-hmm.
when you go to the community college, when you go to the liberal arts institution, when you don't go to college and you start gigging or you start recording
Yep,
right away, that's when the world really opens up, because you're not trying to fit into these very narrow pathways of success that institutions tend to build. And I know I'm speaking broadly in generalities. I don't mean to offend anyone, but based on my own experiences, I think what you're saying is absolutely accurate. And we have to change that rhetoric that, well, you go to school so you have opportunity. I think that that's not true. In the 21st century, the opportunity already exists through technology and collaboration. You go to school, and I often tell this when I'm sort of mentoring students into college. I was a first generation college student. I'm very proud of that. My mom and dad hadn't graduated high school. It was a big deal for me to go to college. I went to college for the resources. I was very passionate coming out of high school. I'm going to be successful. I want to achieve
mm-hmm.
certain things in my life. College did not give that to me, but college did connect me with grants and money and opportunity and conferences and trips that I never would have had otherwise. And so that's something I think and I'll add this to that conversation for any teachers and or students that are watching, especially high school students. I was just talking to a youth orchestra in Central Washington about this. God bless. There were some seniors that were applying to colleges, and all they kept saying was, "I just hope I get in. I just hope I get in." And there was one young woman in particular. She kept saying that, and I said, "I have to stop you for a second, and maybe a faculty member has not told you this yet, and I hope I'm not the first or last to explain this, but we need you.
Yeah,
You don't need us. Universities and colleges do not exist without students.
right.
So this idea that I'm going to decide whether or not you get to continue your education is absolutely ridiculous. No one should tell you whether or not you get to keep learning. That is not the role of a university. My goal is to convince you that coming here is going to serve you best because of the resources and the community that we've built. And I'll add to that, forgive me, because this is a shameless plug, but I am very proud to be a part of an institution that's starting to work against that. This past summer, we
Great.
got rid of all of the articulated audition requirements. We
That's
no longer have the one romantic, one baroque, one slow,
yeah.
one fast. Our audition requirement is for you to perform at your ability and allow us to evaluate your skill and then talk to you about how we can advance that skill. Because we've had more incredible musicians come to SPU that were musically illiterate but could play circles around students that had memorized a concerto. It's no longer one path for success.
Well, yeah, and th- we as educators in any realm, I guess. So the school forum, the private teacher community,
Yes.
we in the higher ed world, we all need to kind of check ourselves when we're talking about, oh no, you about what students need to do and what is and isn't valuable, right?
Yes.
I personally feel that, and I went to the University of Montana. I was, they have a full, offering for music ed, and I was taught by string faculty and other qualified musical faculty. But I didn't go to Yale. I didn't go to Juilliard. There ain't no way I would have gotten in. Okay, I mean seriously. But you could go to your local community college and become just as successful of a string teacher or any type of music teacher, as if you had gone to Juilliard or whatever conservatory. You don't have to have this like, if I don't get in Juilliard, I'm definitely not successful. Therefore, I'm going to walk away from all of this or whatever. If you don't get in, apply somewhere else and use it as a tool, just like you were talking about, Christopher. You were talking about this gave me resources and tools as opposed to the right or wrong answer. Use the tools that you get, use the support you get, and use that to cook down your philosophy and what drives you. And then when you go out into the world, you need to push that envelope and make that available to other students who are in your position. We're here to serve students and bring students to the goals that they want. The national standards. If we are looking at the national standards, you'll realize that they are based on the creative process. Yeah. So basically, they kind of went backwards. They were like, let's look at artists. Okay, what do artists do? Because what artists do is what we want our students to engage in. So they were like, okay, artists create, they perform, they respond, and they connect.
Yes.
Okay, and so if we are truly interested in having our students think like artists and act like artists, we need to be approaching all of the aspects of the creative process and the artistic process. And I believe that when we prioritize not just the performing aspect of the national standards, or just not just the performing aspect of music education, I believe we will be serving students in a more culturally responsive way. Because
Amen.
at that point, they are creating their goals and what drives them, and we are giving them the tools and the background and the support and the ability to make decisions on their own about things, to go ahead and engage in that later on. And students don't always have to become professional musicians. We want people who appreciate artistic work. And then, sometimes they will go into performing it, maybe just for fun, or maybe professionally, or maybe they'll go into teaching it, or maybe they'll go into innovating it, connecting it to our world in a way that you and I have no idea yet what that'll be, because the students that we're working with right now are absolutely brilliant, and they're going to go out and they're going to do the next cool big thing that changes our lives.
Yes, this Sunday sermon brought to you by Reverend Fortune. I'm telling you just preach. This is, I mean, obviously we're jaded because you're saying everything that I would absolutely agree with. A shout out to Bruce Walker, and thank you for, he says, big fans of you both, but I'm a huge fan of Bruce and the amazing things he's doing.
Me too.
And a shout out to one of my students that's watching, Chris. Thank you for your comments. And I think, Chris, I actually thought of you when Miss Fortune was talking. He's an absolutely phenomenal cellist, phenomenal musician that had those similar experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get into this place. I didn't satisfy the requirements of this teacher, and therefore I don't make it. I want to add this. I can't. It's already past an hour, which just blows my mind. So I want us to finish. But you said something so important that is yet another misconception I think people have, is this idea of, we don't want all of our students to become professional musicians. I think that's absolutely accurate. But for people that aren't conscious of what that means, I think they need to understand, I want every one of my students to become and remain a musician. I don't expect all of them to be professional musicians.
Mm-hmm.
When I think of the term professional musician, I'm not thinking about a standard. And I think that's where most people's minds go, is that you're good enough to be a professional musician.
Mm-hmm.
My mind, when someone says professional musician to me, and it's probably just because of my background, I just think that means you sustain your living through making music. A professional musician is someone that pays their rent by making music, that pays their bills by that's a professional musician. And I can tell you firsthand, with the gigs I've done, I know people that are really crappy players that are professional musicians.
Right.
Like, let's just put it out there. I know people that aren't great, but they're professional musicians because they've got a voice and they use it and people like it and they pay to hear it, and that's it. They're professional musicians. So the idea, I think, it's just a huge misconception that I used to say it all the time, like, I don't teach so that my students become professional musicians. I feel like I have to translate it. I don't teach so that my students will then only make music with their lives and that's how they sustain their living. That's never my goal. I want all of my students. I want every person in the world to be a musician. I think every person in the world is a musician. Mm-hmm. Music is a part of what we do. So I'm so glad that you said that, because I think we really exaggerate that term professional musician, and we create an impossible standard. Yep. That we hold it to this place of in my student Chris's case, he's a cellist, that it's like, well, if you're not like Yo-Yo Ma, you're a failure. Like, right? If you're not Itzhak Perlman, or if you don't become like Yehudi Menuhin, then then you just fail at being a string player. Like, we set these impossible standards and don't take a step back to say, like, these are all artists that were successful in one way. And it blows my mind because I mentioned those two artists in particular. When you looked at the end of Yehudi Menuhin's career, which that's another teacher talk to talk about string players and how they're forced to end their career at a certain time. That's
Mhm.
another conversation. But you looked at his career, he started getting into yoga, he started doing Indian improvisation, he started branching out because he reached a limit.
Mhm.
Same thing with Yo-Yo Ma. He's got the Silk Road Ensemble, and of course he still plays Bach, but he's
Yeah.
doing all this. He's playing with Edgar Meyer. Like, I think it's important for people to start to disambiguate this idea of the professional musician, especially when you're a string player or a vocalist. I know so many vocalists, my incredible partner included, that like, well, if you don't sing opera, you're not successful. Like, what is that? It's just so
Right.
not true. There's so much beauty and diversity in the field of music. And I don't think any teacher should aspire to convincing their students to depend on music for the rest of their life. But we should always encourage our students to continue to make music because just like you said, that's where we get the people that want to be the donors and the funders and the supporters and the innovators. It's because they want to get back to the purity of just making music with other human beings. Man,
Right.
you got me
Yeah.
on my pulpit now, and we're already past an hour. I want to respect your time because I know we both have work to do with this
Yes.
collaboration that we're doing.
Yeah.
But I have to tag you to come back. We've got to do another teacher talk
Absolutely.
and
I
keep
just
this
love
conversation
talking
going.
about this. I
It's just
love it.
so true. And thank you again and again for your wisdom and the experiences that you have and that you're sharing. A huge thank you to everybody that was listening today. If you are watching this on our archives, we have a playlist that's set up on YouTube. Please feel free to share it. If you watched it live and missed any part of it, this will be available after I end the broadcast in a second. I hope more than anything else that you will use this as a way to continue conversations. Please this is a launching off point. Do not let the things that Beth and I talked about end with this broadcast. Take this into your communities, whether you're a public school teacher or you're teaching at the university level, you're a community musician, if you're just a novice, wherever you are, the opportunities to courageously collaborate, I'm stealing Beth's words, to
Yeah.
courageously collaborate still exist. And now more than ever, there's a need to do that. So, Beth, again and again, thank you
Yeah.
for sharing your words. I look forward to having another teacher talk with you sometime soon. And we'll share some of the stuff we've been working on. We're going to publish some stuff at the end of this month. And then we've got some awesome stuff coming up with
Yes.
Wintergrass. So we'll use this as a platform to promote that as well. Thank you for everybody that's watching. I look forward to staying in contact. And again, keep these conversations going. We look forward to connecting in the future.